So, comparing these cameras, we've got a FLIR Tau 2 640 at 30 hertz. We've got a FLIR Boson 640 at 60 hertz. And we've got a FLIR E60 at 60 hertz nominally. You can kind of see in the top left, that is the Tau 2 as is marked, and that's it's being read through composite video, which is kind of my biggest complaint with the camera, really. The Boson is being read as a USB video device, UVC, so that's all digital, easy enough. And then the E60 is actually being read both by the same capture card as the Tau 2, and it's being just captured as a screen grab from FLIR tools. So I have some control over the palettes and the settings from that. But I'm basically just trying to demonstrate the differences between the cameras. You can see they all, on this palette, I think the Tau 2 is a slightly different palette than the other two. But you can see they all basically have the same color schemes, the same colors are hot, and you get largely the same image, even though the Boson has a 50-degree lens and is about a meter closer than the other two, and the E60 has like an inspection lens, so it's the narrowest field of view of all of them. The E60 is also a quarter of the overall resolution as the other two. The picture looks pretty good for that, I would say. And I've got them focused to about the same spot. My biggest complaint with any of these is with the Boson, and you can actually see it now, that if you look at my face, there's very little definition of the color of the like different temperature gradations of my face. And you can see in the Tau 2, actually pretty clearly here, that I've got this yellow like ring around my nose and mouth, where it's a little warmer than my cheeks, which are darker. And while you can see that my cheeks are a little darker in the Boson, you can't really see that that higher temperature ring right around the center there. And this becomes more apparent when you switch to the rainbow, because the rainbow seems to be the best for picking out very small details. Not this rainbow. Where's the rain? That one. Because here in the Tau 2, you can see very clearly that the hottest spots are like right here on my neck, and then right here in this nose and mouth area, and everything else is quite a bit darker. But even changing several times, several different palettes with Boson, you don't really see that. Like this is the highest contrast palette that I've seen for these same settings, and you can see more clearly the what's it called? The cool spots on my cheeks, and you can see that this front and center and like forehead area are hotter than that, but you can't see that what the Tau 2 is showing, where this area, this forehead area, is actually cooler than the area around my nose and mouth. So that's not quite the same dynamic range, and I think most of my complaints with the Boson are with the dynamic range. The Tau 2 is not radiometric, so the only one that's actually capable of getting like temperature data is the E60, and you can see on the right side of the rightmost capture of the two of them that if I've got like a little graph showing the ambient temperature and the scale of everything. This is kind of amplified to a degree by the Boson is not as easy to control. Like the Boson application, it's difficult to describe if you haven't used it before. It gives you lots of sliders for changing things, and a lot of them are good to use and to change things, but it doesn't give you much control over where the palette lies on the total dynamic range displayed by the camera. And one of the great things about the free FLIR tools is that if I take this and I'm going to just slide up the high range, like there's a little bar graph slider below that kind of shows you, it in brackets, it shows you the what's it called? It shows you the total thermal data that the camera's taking, and if you grab the edge of the slider, you can just drag it up, and you can make the whole image darker, which doesn't mean a lot in this case. But if you switch to a different palette, you'll see as they go, like this rainbow high contrast. If I pull up this one, you can see the hottest spots become, the warm spots become darker and the hottest spots remain white. So you can kind of get a little bit more visual difference out of the very top end. In the same way you can do it by pulling down the other side. But that's kind of like flattening out everything. It's making the colors map more evenly to, or I guess less evenly, making fewer of the colors map to the same pixels on the camera. In any case, Going back to here, yeah. So when you try to do like the Boson app works fine. It seems to connect all right, but it doesn't give you that same palette control, which would be really great because the palettes here, and I find this with kind of all of them, you can see the most contrast on my face with this palette. This one, I'm a lantern. This one, still, like, you can see a little bit. It's there. There's some contrast there. This one, I am just a light bulb. I'm not even a lantern. I'm just a light bulb. um, but anything that has like a bunch of bright colors in the top end of the palette just doesn't seem to give you a lot of definition. This one's actually not bad. I'm not crazy about the background color being like so bright for the like mid-tone that it is, but you know, I'll take it. The one really like big advantage, aside from the frames per second, because the Boson is 60 hertz where the Tau 2 is only 30. The really nice thing about the Boson's like image options is that you do have very comprehensive control. I would say more comprehensive control than the Tau 2. But the biggest like advantage it has is the digital enhancement. And right now I've got it set to 1.1, and I'll turn it down. I normally like this for getting what is close to like a thermal image in the other ones, and I'll switch palettes to demonstrate this more clearly. Go to my default, which is Fusion usually. So there are slightly different palettes on the Tau 2 and the Boson, but this is like a similar level of contrast, or not contrast, of like, not edge detection, a similar level of edges, a similar like sharpness to the two images, with approximately the same focus. But if you take the Boson application and you start turning up the detail enhancement, like let's say like 1.5 or so, it looks like there's a lot more definition. There's a lot more harder edges on things, and it looks like you can kind of see, like the crinkles in my shirt are much more pronounced. And this is a way to get around some of the, like the palette limitations in display of the Boson. It can actually be turned very high. Like you can basically just make it edges only by turning the detail enhancement to 6. But at more normal levels, like up to 2 or so, you do get more graininess in the image. It's not as flat, but you do get a lot more like clear edges. I'll push this back a little farther. You can see this is with detail enhancement set to 2. My mixer here, you can tell that it's like, you can tell where the sliders are, you can tell where the cables are. It's almost a little overdone on the Boson though, because you can see like so much detail to that image, and I think it effectively makes it look like a higher resolution imager. You can actually see here that the Boson is a little taller than the Tau 2. They actually have the same sensor, or the same size sensor. They're very different sensors, but the same size sensor. They're both 640 by 512. But because of this digital enhancement effect, you can make it look like it's a higher resolution. You can make it look like it's a higher detail one. And then because of the limitations of the composite video output from the Tau 2 that's in NTSC mode now, you chop off the top and bottom few pixels because the 640 by 512 is only supported by the PAL output version, which you can do, but then you're also at a lower frame rate. So I'll turn this back down to a more like regular level. The other thing, and we've seen it a little bit as this is going. I'm going to turn this back to, let's see, let's make these similar. But you've seen this a little when they're going, and then there you get it again. Another problem I've seen with the Boson is this little flickering, and that's effectively artifacts of auto-ranging. But it tries to auto-range really fast, and I don't know why. I'll show you in a second how slow the Tau 2 does it by default, but this is set to, the Boson is set to 7,500 out of like 8,000 or so that it can go to, and it's still flickering this quickly. But if I go out of frame, you can see that the Boson like switches much faster, but I've found that when you're out of frame, when there's not a hot object in the center, it tends to flicker a lot more. It might not be the case now, but you are seeing a little bit here, and the Tau 2 really doesn't do that. And actually, as the chair cools, the Tau 2's like maximum gain will go up higher than the Boson, even though that is configurable in the Boson to their fairness. Looking at this, actually I'm going to cross over so I can see this on the camera better. It does. Yeah, looking at this like closer, and sorry if this is a little louder, I'll try to speak a little softer. Looking at this closer, you do see more detail. There are like harder edges on things in the Boson's image, but you can also see a little more vertical striation, especially if you're looking at the wall kind of behind me. And you definitely see more, what is this, like vignetting. And I see most of this at the top, but there's a little bit in the like the bottom corners as well. One of the corners you can't see because it's covered. But this is actually, I think this is related to the lens calibration, which is an interesting thing because the Tau 2 doesn't offer it, and presumably the E60 has it built in. Maybe the Tau 2 also has it like built in from the factory. But in the Boson app, it lets you change, and if I change from lens from 0 to 1, you can see much more of this vignetting on the outside. And I think this is probably just the one lens setting is probably just an uncalibrated one. This is just a default flat field or something similar to that. So it helps a lot to have this set, and it may still be like something I can redo because I do have a black body that I can, I can check uniformity of the sensor with. But yeah, I've seen this in most of the images I've seen off of Bosons, where the outer edges, especially this like top edge, seems to have just a little bit of heating, and it may be that the core is running a little hotter. It may be that the lens assembly itself is like a little thinner, a little worse heat sunk, or something like that. That's kind of making it sick. Oh, you can see a good where my arms were resting on my shirt. But yeah, it's very small things. It's a very capable thermal camera, but it's got this little flicker that I'm sure if with some SDK settings I could mess with, but I haven't been able to fully get rid of by just messing around in the Boson app. And then it's got this little bit of vignetting on the outside that makes it look kind of less even than it probably should be. And actually, I'm gonna get out of the chair again because if this cools down enough, maybe if I move that, does that help? Yeah, you can see the auto ranging of the Tau 2 has scaled up quite a bit. Like it looks quite bright in the parts of the area that are warm now. It's been a little bit less in the Boson, but you still see a little bit more of that banding kind of on the top side, and it's just, yeah, it's a little disappointing because it's a fancy new camera, and it's much smaller than like the lens is actually, the lens on the Boson is maybe bigger than the Tau 2's lens, but the whole thing is, you could fit like, you could fit 4 cores in the same size if you wanted to. So there's a lot of capability there, and the app does give you a lot of control over like the options. But it seems like even with the more advanced correction algorithms and the more advanced like contrast algorithms, that the thermal sensor just doesn't have the same sensitivity. It's worth mentioning, I didn't mention this in the first place, the Boson, this one, is the professional grade, so this is the mid-tier of the thermal sensitivity, whereas the Tau 2 is actually the commercial grade. It's the lowest thermal sensitivity rated, and yet I think the Tau 2 shows like pretty clearly that it has better thermal sensitivity than the Boson. Like it can differentiate so much more color difference from the face, and this is not only the palette, because we saw that area right around the center, which the E60 gets and the Tau 2 gets, but the Boson just kind of blends together. There's like, I don't know, another half bit or full bit of resolution that it seems to get in its dynamic range, which is too bad, because it's a neat little camera. But yeah, a little comparison. Since I have these 3 together, finally, I just got the Boson recently, I figured I'd do a little bit of testing and see how things were working. Put this up on the internet so that people looking at dumping a whole bunch of money into a thermal camera can kind of know what they're getting into. The Boson 640 is very capable, and if size is the critical factor, there's no choice. Like it's tiny, and it's great for that. But there are some image quality issues with it. It's got more post-processing options, so if you're just looking for like object detection, like if you're looking for picking out people or objects and their shape at a longer distance, it's probably a better choice than the Tau 2, because even with the lower sensitivity, it has more kind of post-processing that it can do to get you the clarity of that object. But for just thermal measurements, it's probably not the core of choice. It's too bad.